Who is your daddy? I am your father.
You fathers will understand.
My father taught me many things.
I got an idea. How about you all sit there quietly while I make dad noises?
All right, well, we are here with episode 98 of our little podcast about video games from the perspective of a couple of dads. I'll reiterate one more time, not a dad couple, but a couple of dads. And, yeah, so we have done 98 of these episodes, which is pretty crazy. I know that in a couple of weeks, we'll be doing our 100th episode. Not sure exactly what we'll talk about other than I'm thinking that might be the time that we do our top 10 ever type list or something like that.
Yeah, we should.
Something before
we should make it special. Like I said last week, we should definitely get together in San Francisco. Rainbows exploding everywhere. Just have a good time. Eli will definitely be there if we bring food. So that should
see if we can't trigger half the population of San Francisco. We probably could.
I could easily do it. You just have to give
we probably could.
You just have to give me a few minutes. I already triggered Alana's boyfriend, so I can get to anybody. And he's the man.
Yeah, but you know
he's
what?
the manliest of man. So
I do like his tactic of calling you by the wrong name. That's actually a pretty good tactic when you want to really take somebody off. Shut up, Darren.
Shut up, Darren. F off, Darren. Let me check the keyboard real quick. I just want to check and see if the N and K are close to each other. I think he just thought my name was Darren. Or like you said, maybe he was trying to send a message of, you're not relevant, you're not important, so F off, Darren.
It's completely a power play. It's a subtle way to try to troll someone to go, that's not even my name. So I'm glad you didn't bite. That's good. All right, well, we're going to talk about microtransactions today. And Battlefront 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is now out. And, of course, EA has really stirred up the pot for this conversation. So we're going to dive into this a little bit. But before we get to that, we are going to talk about stuff we're playing. So, Derek, I know you didn't put anything down, so I'm really excited to hear, since we haven't connected on this yet. What kind of games are you playing these days? I know last week we talked. You were playing a ton of stuff with your new Xbox One X. And by the way, for those of you listening, if you missed last week's episode and you're curious about the new Xbox console, the X, then go back and listen to last week's episode. Derek gave us a nice rundown of what he's experiencing so far. But what about for this week? I highly doubt you're still playing that high volume of games, right?
Not really. I mean, I'm playing a lot of Rocket League just for fun, especially on the weekends where I have more time to game. I should be really focused on my main game, but I just keep playing Rocket League. I think it's because Rocket League allows me to play games and argue at the same time, my two favorite hobbies. So if anybody follows me on Facebook or Twitter or anything, if I'm ever active on Twitter, I am fighting. I am not on there to have fun. I'm on there to trigger somebody and fight with somebody. So I think Rocket League appeals to me because it's like, oh, I can play this really fun game and then start yelling at somebody I don't know at all. So I've been playing.
So you're saying that in between games you would retweet and counter-tweet and argue with people and then jump into another game, and then that was your pattern.
Yeah, that's my pattern. Yeah. While I'm typing on Rocket League that you suck, worst teammates ever, stuff that you've heard before because, well, it was true with you. You and I had, we had a few good moments. Like, we won that one vodka tournament, and we never did another one.
Yeah.
But other than that, you were trash most of the time.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
No problem. So, here's my goal. December 1st is a huge game. A game I'm really excited for. Coming to the Switch, because, you know, I'm a Nintendo bot. And that would be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I played the first one.
This is, by the way, this is less than 2 weeks away. So December 1st sounds like a long way away, but we're coming down to it.
We're recording on November 18th, so it's crazy. So I actually created a gaming goal. Such a nerd thing to do, but I did it. And that was, I wanted to try to, because, and you will relate to this, and most gamers who buy as many games as you and I buy will relate to this. The reason I set the goal is because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is going to be I imagine, a pretty massive big game. Am I going to beat it? I don't know. I got really far into Chronicles, like really far, and I never finished it. And the main reason is I struggle to finish JRPGs, but it's also because they just take forever. They get redundant.
Yeah.
You do the same thing over and over. But I do want to go into that release of that game, because I am excited for it, with kind of, I won't say a clear plate because I've got too many games, but a nice, I want to feel like I can just jump into that game and not be like, oh, it came out, let me start the first 30 minutes, but I haven't beaten Assassin's Creed Origins, or the other one I really want is to beat before Xenoblade is, I'm going to forget it. Horizon Zero Dawn, not the main campaign.
The Frozen Wilds.
I beat that twice, but the Frozen Wilds. So I'm still working my way through the Frozen Wilds. I played that a lot last week, and I haven't touched it all week, but I was really focused on Assassin's Creed Origins. So I got further, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that I'm to the point where I'm on a mission where I'm going to try to assassinate the crocodile. I'm not going to tell you who that is. So I think I'm pretty far into the game. I don't know how far, but I think I'm pretty far.
You are pretty close to the ending of the main story.
Okay, that's what I want. And then,
you're just a few missions away, maybe 4 or 5 missions away from the.
Okay, so then I should have really focused on that today, and I didn't. So I should. That was really stupid of me. But yeah, so
because I'm pretty much at that same exact spot. So
Yeah, so those are the two games that I've been kind of focusing on, and those are the ones I really care about. Yes, of course, I'm trying out other stuff. Still, I love my Xbox One X. I love my PC. So those are the two main ones. And honestly, I've been kind of rejecting my PS4. I mean, I never turn it on. I did turn it on to play The Division today because I was in the mood for The Division. So
The Division, wow.
Yeah, we were talking, Jesse, my brother, and Rob and I were all trying to figure out a co-op game that we could get together on a weekend and play. And so we're kind of voting and trying to figure out.
Oh, that's a pretty good one. That's a good pick, The Division. That's not a bad
We
pick.
kind of picked that. At first we did. And Jesse White, who's the cheapest person I've ever met in my entire life, except when it comes to beer, he finally decided that he would buy The Division on the PS4. He does have it on the Xbox One, but he would buy it on the PS4 because he could get it for like $8 or $9. We're not asking him to spend a lot of money. So we finally talked him into that. I mean, it took forever, and he was like, fine, I'll just get it next week at GameStop, whatever. I said, yes, all right. So we got all 4 of us have it on the PS4. We'll play it. Then they start changing it to, oh, you guys like that game? Of course, now I'm going to forget it. Diablo 3.
Uh-huh.
And my brother doesn't have Diablo 3. Rob doesn't have Diablo 3. I have it. I just don't care. I think it's okay. I'm not in love with it. And then Jesse loves it. So they, for some reason, decided that's the game they're most excited to play. So I'm like, well, I'm going to be on The Division, so screw you guys. No, I'll play with them. I do have it, and I will play with them.
And, I've got Diablo 3 too. I was convinced to buy that a couple years back when it was down to $30 at one point. I know it's probably cheaper than that now. And I was convinced to buy it. I probably played it for about 2 nights with a group of people, and it was kind of fun, but then never opened it up again after that. So
I'm not a big fan of top-down type stuff, and while it's more of an angle, not completely top-down, I just find those games kind of redundant. I know you can say that about every game, but it's obviously just not something that really appeals to me. And I know when they listen to this show on Monday, they're going to be like, well, you don't want to play this? No, I'll play it. Let me make sure I'm clear. I will play it, and maybe I will have fun with it, but I just thought it was hilarious because I wish you were in those chats. Well, I really don't because I hate you. But I wish you could at least see those chats because not only were we chatting on our group page, but then we were chatting in our little group messaging page, and it was like Rob was getting frustrated. He's like, what are we doing? Why are we so difficult? Because everybody's just changing it every 5 seconds. Like, first we agreed on The Division, then we started talking about another game, then we started talking about another game. And it's always one of us doesn't have the game, or one of us doesn't really want to play that game. And so we
let's just all get back on Rocket League like the glory days.
And
all right?
that's honestly, in the 3 years that we've been a group and now 2 years that we've been doing this podcast, crazy. It's like, has it been 2 years? Wow.
It's been almost 2 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. But the 2 years, 3 years that we've been a group and we've been gaming together, the only game that almost everybody would go, yeah, I'll play that, is Rocket League. Every other game, it's always like, well, I don't want to pay for Destiny, or I don't want to play Diablo 3, or I don't want to do this. So we always run into some type of issue.
See, Destiny 2 is a blast. So if those of you out there are wondering what games should I get and play some co-op, I think Destiny 2 is a blast, 100% worth the money. Solo play, but mostly because it's really fun to play with friends. The problem is, once you get more than 3, unless you guys are really gearing up for a big raid, there's really not much you can do. You can chat together, but it's really just about 3 of you doing the strikes and stuff together. But
I really hate that they limit it to 3. I'm sure they have their reasons, so I'm not going to go rant about it or anything like that. But I do hate that, because there's 4 of us that want to play a game, and Destiny 2 probably could have sold Jesse on it and got him to buy it if we could have said, yeah, every Friday night we're going to play the 4 of us, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it'd be cool if they, and I know they won't, it's a fundamental part of their game. They've built it into strike teams of 3, but it'd be cool if they had a way to have it go up to 4, maybe even 5, and then they would scale up the enemies or difficulty as necessary with each person you had. But whatever, they don't do that. That's a good option, but of course, Rocket League, you mentioned you're playing it still every once in a while. I've been playing it on the Switch recently, so I'll give you my thoughts on that here in a second. But just reminding me of how much I love that game. It actually makes me want to play with some of you guys from the group again. And late at night, a few of us, not usually me or you, but a few people are usually intoxicated and saying hilarious and offensive things, and it's just fun.
I actually just am offensive sober, so I don't need beer.
Right, and yours isn't so much offensive, so much as just aggressive, just cruel, and yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been playing Rocket League on the Switch. My quick take on it is I am impressed that Psyonix got this thing to play at 60 frames per second.
Yeah.
It plays very smoothly. It's really fun in handheld mode when we've got, like we were watching through like MasterChef or some reality show that I only half pay attention to, and I can sit there and play a bunch of games of Rocket League in handheld mode, and that's a lot of fun. I love doing that. As soon as you throw it up on the big screen, the graphical comparison becomes kind of laughable. I mean, It's not even close. It's not even close. Even in the handheld mode, when the screen's sitting still before the game starts, you're like, wow, this kind of looks like a last-gen console. This doesn't look great. Once it gets in motion, you forget all about it. It plays smoothly. It's super fun, very responsive. Matchmaking was great. All the options of the Mario cars and Luigi cars and Metroid, it's all awesome. It just is not a sharp-looking kind of glossy game. If you play it on your PS4 or your Xbox One or your PC, you're going to get a pretty glossy, smooth experience, and it's very shiny, it's kind of eye-popping. Although you don't really think about it after a while, game after game. You stop looking at the visuals, you're just playing the game. So for the Switch, it's the other way around. You kind of go, oh, this isn't the prettiest version of this, but then once you start playing, you forget about that. So, and that's a very honest review of it. The biggest knock I have on it is it just is not nearly as pretty as the other versions.
I still think gamers are, and I'm not saying you're doing this, I know you're just being fair, actually. I think a lot of gamers are still a little, and I'm not trying to make an excuse for Nintendo, a little unfair with their comparisons of Nintendo games that are, I should say, PlayStation and Xbox games that are coming over to the Nintendo console.
Like Doom and Rocket League are the two biggest examples right now.
I mean, I get that it's a home console, but you have to be a complete idiot if you don't realize that this truly is a handheld console.
Absolutely.
More than it is really a home console. Like the way they structure
it is the size of an iPad mini.
Yeah.
I mean, the actual unit is tiny. So the fact that they get these things to run, and Mario Odyssey, which we'll talk about in a second, and Legend of Zelda, and Splatoon 2, and they got all these games to run, and the upcoming Xenoblade game, this is an impressive piece of tech, no matter which company made it. That being said, when you release a game that's already been out in other systems and you're used to it, it's impossible not to compare it in some ways. You know, I've heard positive things about the recently released Skyrim, just in terms of, hey, it's pretty close to the special edition that just came out. Will it match up with what you can do on a PC with all the mods? No, it's not going to match up to that. but it's Skyrim in handheld mode. So
Yeah.
if you are a big fan of the Elder Scrolls games, it's a
Did
no-brainer.
you buy that?
Of course you should get this. I did not. No, that's one that I'll get on sale and give one. I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy it when it's on sale, and I'm going to give it another shot because I've tried that game twice now. And I put anywhere from 4 to 6 hours into it and then just kind of faded from it. But I'm going to give that one more shot because the Switch, to me, is such an appealing system to play games on.
Well, and we've talked about this before. When it comes to RPGs, the world really matters to me. Like, I'm not talking about the characters and stuff like that. Of course that matters. But the world really matters. And Skyrim, I've always wanted to love Skyrim because I think it has one of the best worlds. I'm not saying it's...
Well, and I haven't even scratched the surface of it. I mean, have you dug into it quite a bit?
I played on the 360, I put in over 10 hours. And then on the PS4, I probably put another 8 to 10 hours. So
from what I've heard, I doubt the two of us have even scratched the surface of what that game has in store.
And my issue was, and that was what I was getting at, is while I absolutely love the world, it just gives me, I don't know, I can't explain it. I just love being in it. I hate the combat. I feel like it's so bland and boring that I just get tired of the game, and I'm like, you know what, I'd rather play The Witcher 3 or even Dragon Age and Inquisition. Something else that gives me that same feeling when I'm in that world, but actually is fun to play. But that was just my take on Skyrim.
Yeah, no, so I haven't gotten that one or Doom yet, although Doom is what I'm ready to buy. It's just, dude, we're in that weird spot. Most of you can relate to this. Money's kind of tight, not only with holidays. We just are buying a ton of food for guests coming in. We had to buy a new refrigerator. I had to pay to fill in some insulation in our ceiling that was apparently had like all kind of fallen down. You'd live in Florida, so you don't know why I would need this, but you need insulation when it's cold. And so anyway, we're losing heat, things like that. So I had two major projects in our house that I had to pay for. So things are tight.
Sounds like excuses on why you don't have an Xbox One X right now.
That is one of the reasons that I don't have an Xbox One X. But
why can't you just sell one of your kids? There has to be one that you and your wife agree that is your least favorite. You could get $500 for it.
Yeah, I won't tell you which ones, but we've got two of them listed on Craigslist. They've gotten a lot of views, just not a lot of offers yet, you know? So we're waiting. We're waiting for the right offer.
Drop your price, but make sure it stays above $500.
Yeah, we got to get at least 500, right? So I can get the X.
Yeah.
No, but I feel more and more convinced every day that I want to see the prettiest version of stuff on a console. And the reason why is as I'm playing Assassin's Creed Origins, that's another one of my major games I'm playing right now. Gorgeous game, but playing on the standard PS4, there are moments when I keep thinking this, I wonder what this looks like on the X. Just because like I have that moment where I'm like, you know, that texture right there, or the way that popped in, or the way that kind of got glitchy, I wonder if that's what it looks like on the X, or if I'm missing out on something. So I have a little bit of that itch, that curiosity, and the excitement of seeing stuff pretty much as good as a console can show it. So I am very, very interested in that, but money reality has struck the nest
down the road. I do want to say, and I know we have probably a pretty long conversation, so I want to move into it, but I do want to say, going back to last week, there's a couple things I want to hit on. One of my concerns, or even going back a couple weeks when I was trying to sell you on the Xbox One X, I kept saying, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you or make you believe something that I'm not 100% on. I kept saying, I don't know how third parties are going to turn out. I'm telling you, every single video I watch from Digital Foundry, every third-party game, they're saying, it's better on X. It's better on X. And they break it down.
Right, yeah.
Now, I'm not talking like X is running native 4K and the PS4 Pro is running 1440p. It's not that different. But every single game is running better. And I was also, one other thing I want to add is, I was able to get I pretty much got it for free because I used a buy two, get one free coupon. But I was able to get Assassin's Creed Origins on the Xbox One X. And the reason I did this is I just wanted to see what it looked like, and then I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
So I actually played a couple hours on the One X compared to my PC version, the GTX 1080 version that I play. And I got to say, it's really good. Now, you got to remember, the One X has HDR, so does your PS4. I found out the PC version was supposed to get HDR, did not get it. But here's the weird thing. I've now plugged in my computer straight into my 4K TV. I actually moved my 4K TV over into my gaming area. I got permission from my wife. I said, can I move this out of the living room? You guys don't use it anyways. I'll put another smaller TV in the living room, and can I just have this in my gaming area? And she said, go for it. So I did that, and I flipped on the HDR switch on my computer. So on Microsoft 10, or Windows 10 is what I was trying to say. Windows 10, I flipped the HDR switch. It clicks on when I boot up the game, yet the game says it doesn't have HDR. So I find that to be a little weird. But anyways, quick comparison, and then we'll move on. Yes, my PC version is way more detailed, looks better, and even runs at better frames per second. But the Xbox One X is pretty comparable. Like I was saying in the original show, it's pretty impressive with the HDR lighting and the pretty much, I'm going to say it's probably close to 1800p's is what it's running at a lot of times. It looks really good on the One X. Like, it's not that big of a downgrade when, again, you compare a $500 Xbox One Xbox and an $1,800 PC. So, pretty awesome.
Yeah, there are moments in that game, again, even on the standard PS4, that I kind of go, whoa, this is a good-looking game.
It did a really good job.
It synchronizes and it pans around. I'm just looking at the distance, off in the distance, and I'm like, man, I'm getting the same feelings I got a lot of times with Witcher 3, where you just kind of go, how did they do this? This looks amazing. Or even with Breath of the Wild, with Zelda, as you look around, you're like, this is pretty stunning. So I get very similar vibes as I play through Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm still enjoying that quite a bit. I do like the combat, but it is so easy if you are at or above, I think, the level of the enemies. I think it's incredibly easy. It's almost arcadey. If there are levels above you, or if it's those bounty hunters that are coming after you, then it becomes insanely difficult. So it just really depends.
That, to me, is a flaw in the game, but this is, again, just my take, that I had a mission where it said recommended level 26, and I was level 28. I went to go fight those guys. I think the game glitched. There's no way they were 26 because I was jumping from above and doing an assassination move and only taking off like 100 damage, which was like barely a little bit of their block, which they have like 10 blocks. So
that sounds like a glitch of some kind.
And I was like, what the heck? And I fought other enemies that were higher level, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'd fight a coyote, which was higher level, and it wouldn't do any damage to it. I'm like, what the heck? So I get it's an RPG. I understand what they're doing. Kind of same thing they do with The Division. You shoot one guy who's a lower level, you kill him right away. It feels like a regular shooter. You go fight somebody who's above your level or even equal to your level, they become a bullet sponge. Like, you have to shoot them 50 billion times. So that's kind of what they did here. My issue that I was going to tell you from playing Assassin's Creed more, and you did this mission already, one of the missions you get in like an arena and you fight a bunch of people, warriors. Very, very frustrating. And I know I'm going to sound like a snob, but I'm just going to say it. I was cursing this game because I was like, you are not Bloodborne. You are terrible. Like, I'm sitting here trying to dodge, and I'm hitting dodge, and you won't dodge. It's, like, delayed. It just does not have that same feel like Dark Souls or Bloodborne. And again, I know I'm going to sound snobbish, but please understand that I mean this. This is really real to me. It's not me being a snob. The game just does not pick up on things, and it's not as smooth as a Dark Souls 3, and it's clearly trying to do that. And that's my frustration.
It's not even close. The battle simply comes down to, in my opinion, a lot of button mashing. It is good to block and to parry, but even those become kind of useless when it's better just to swing away in most battles. It's just not it's not great in terms of the combat. But a lot of the other pieces are good. There's some pretty emotional moments in the storyline too, which is interesting. They did a good job with some of it. A very good game.
It is good. I wish combat-wise they would have, and I said this last week, I really wish they would have been like, we're going to go for it. We're going to go for that Bloodborne, Dark Souls feel. And again, I'm not talking about like they have to make it as hard as those games. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the feel of it. It doesn't. It's not as responsive. Doesn't move very good. The camera gets all janky and weird. I've had a lot of issues.
It does.
So.
Yeah, the camera gets messed up. The lock-on system is a little messed up. These are all, in my opinion, this is like somewhere between nitpicking and, a minor gripe. I'm not really nitpicking. Some of this stuff does affect how fun the game could be, I think. But at the same time, I'm enjoying a lot of the other aspects of it, the exploration. And there's so much else that I'm having fun with that it doesn't...
To me,
it doesn't make it a bad game.
Yeah, no, and I definitely don't want people to think that. I think the only thing is while I might be nitpicking it a little bit on the combat or being snobbish, I guess, I would still dock it. Just like if I was doing an actual review, I would take at least a half point off.
I would too.
Because I just don't feel like they made that as clean as good. Just like I would. Well, I would do it with The Witcher, but I'm not going to. That game's a perfect 10 just because it does everything else. I shouldn't say perfect. It's not perfect. But it's a 10 because it does so many other things way better. Whereas that's the same thing with Assassin's Creed. The combat, camera, jankiness is probably its weakness for me. But everything else, it's doing really well. Really well.
Yeah, I just came out of Shadow of War, and so I really like that combat system way better. Although I love the RPG aspects of Assassin's Creed a lot better. So... There's pluses and minuses with both. You can't win all of them. I'm enjoying it. I think I'll finish up the story probably this weekend, and then the goal is to see if I can't get some time in with Wolfenstein 2 sometime in the next week or two. I don't own it yet, but I plan on getting it. And then, of course, Xenoblade comes out soon. Speaking of Xenoblade, I got on sale using my Nintendo rewards. I got Xenoblade Chronicles 3D for my 3DS, and I got to be honest, Frank Clark was right. This version of it, because I've seen it on the Wii before, this version of it, not that great. I think I was just expecting something a little more. The visuals on it specifically are kind of rough, in my opinion.
Even in 3D?
Yeah. Now, the 3D aspect is kind of cool, I should say that. That part is pretty cool. But just the overall, the graphical models and the stuff they're trying to do, it almost looks like, early PS2 type stuff, just not great. Maybe even late PS1. So like not the worst ever. It's still playable. I definitely won't finish that game, but I'll play it a little bit more. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there for you guys. If that's something you're considering picking up as we get ready to the launch of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, maybe just get it for the Wii if you still have a Wii instead of the 3DS. I already mentioned Rocket League. I'm having fun with Rocket League. Also, I'm up over 400 moons now in Mario Odyssey. That's still a great. I've got a few minutes to kill. I pick up the game and go get a couple moons, and that game is just a joy to play. I absolutely love Mario Odyssey. So there you go. That's what I'm playing right now. But there's one game that I'm not playing that is causing a whole lot of issues for people these days, and that is Star Wars Battlefront 2. And it's not causing issues because it's a bad game to play. No. It's not causing issues because it's not pretty to look at. And it's not causing issues because people are mad about the way they mess with the lore and the fact you can play with certain characters against others. No one cares about those pieces. All they care about is the way EA has decided to tackle loot boxes and microtransactions this time around. So we'll get to Battlefront 2 specifically shortly, but before we do that, I want to take a step back from kind of a bird's eye view and look at what are microtransactions, what's the history of these things, how did we get where we are now, and then so we'll kind of interact with some of this stuff a bit, and then we'll talk about where we think we go from here, and should we be worried. We'll talk about all those things. Now, we touched on this a little bit, I think 2 weeks ago, and we gave our overall kind of general thoughts to start with. Well, now we're going to take a deeper dive into this because it is just such a major topic of conversation for gamers in general these days. So before we get into it, by the way, what is the last microtransaction that you purchased, or what's the last microtransaction that you made? Do you remember?
That's not cosmetic.
It could be anything.
I just did it not too long ago. Final Fantasy 15 on the Xbox One X. I bought all those 50-cent things. So there's like 50-cent sword, 50-cent whatever. I bought some weapons for 50 cents a piece and some other stuff. So yeah, that's the last thing. I spent a total of $4 and got like 8 things.
Gotcha. Yeah, the last time, because I very rarely do it with console games. I don't know why. Just something about it. I just completely ignore the microtransactions in consoles. But when it comes to phone stuff, because everything you get on the phone is free to play, and then if you want, like the last time I bought something was when I went to go on a walk with my kids. This was a few months, probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I was all out of Pokeballs for Pokemon Go, so I bought a pack of those. I forget how many it was. It was probably like $3 maybe. I don't remember. That's the last time I made a microtransaction, but I'm just as guilty of it as anybody of looking at a experience and deciding to spend a little bit more money to get the thing I need in that moment. So we all are guilty of it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And guilty maybe isn't the right word. I think this is a interesting business tactic, and we'll get into this. But it's not necessarily a purely evil thing. It's just the way it's been rolled out by some companies and some games is just not great. So we'll get into all that. So let's talk first about what are microtransactions. So here's a basic definition. It's a business model where customers can purchase virtual goods within an application or game via a small individual payment. Now, this could be in a free-to-play model, or it could be in a situation where you bought the full game and then you buy some sort of pack or in-game currency, a loot box, maybe some specific in-game items like you purchased. You didn't roll the dice on something. You just knew exactly what you were getting for that 50 cents. Or in some cases, especially with mobile games, you're buying game time. A lot of times mobile games, the free-to-play ones, they'll give you a whole bunch of time to play at the front end to try to get you hooked with the gameplay. And then they'll all of a sudden severely limit the amount of things you can do with some sort of in-game currency that you can't really collect very easily by just playing. You typically, if you want to play for extended periods of time, have to spend some money. So there's a number of ways they can make you, they can kind of guide you towards making these micro purchases. But the idea is it's a business model where customers purchase virtual goods within a game typically, and sometimes it's a non-gaming app of some kind. So
I did
really
just buy the Forza 3 car pass. Would you consider that I guess that would be. I mean, it's like I'm buying extra cars.
The Forza 7 thing? That
or
was
Forza 3. Forza Horizon 3 is what I meant to say.
Oh, okay. So, like, is that something where you could normally go in and buy those cars individually?
No, they are separate. So, yeah, that would count. So it was on sale for this Black Friday, and so tonight, because they're going to patch Horizon 3 on the Xbox One X, I figured for $7 I can get, I think I'm getting like 50 cars or something like that, 50 or 60 cars. So not a bad deal. But yeah, it is separate from the game. Like, you can't unlock them in-game. They're just cars they release after the launch, and if you have this pass, you get them. If you don't, you don't.
Well, and that's where we get to a kind of a gray area between microtransactions and downloadable content, which they release for an additional cost. And in some cases, I think they cross into each other. Sometimes there's some crossover.
Yeah.
And sometimes with what you're talking about, or with an expansion, or with, new story mission, that kind of, like with the new Horizon expansion, I think that's more in the expansion or downloadable content area. And I'm going to separate those for our conversation. And we're really just going to talk about essentially unnecessary purchases that you can make in a game.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to talk about. And so we're going to separate out specifically DLC, expansions, and that kind of thing. We're going to set those aside. And we're going to talk very specifically about microtransactions within the game that get you in-game currency to buy items, loot boxes of some kind, and that's really a gambling element. We'll talk about that too. Or specific in-game items, or in some cases, additional game time. So not new content necessarily, just a way to enhance or speed up your experience. That's really what we're talking about. So let's take a quick walk down history lane. We did this a little bit ago with Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft, and it really helps set the tone for what we're talking about by walking us through the history of how we got here. And so I found several sources over the last week or so, including websites like VentureBeat, US Gamer, Eurogamer. Believe it or not, even Rolling Stone magazine just recently put out a piece about this. And of course, places like Wikipedia and a few others from just generic Google searches, just kind of trying to get a variety of sources on this. So here we go. Let's dive right in. In my opinion, the concept of microtransactions has been around really since arcade machines. I think that's where it began. Because as soon as you run out of lives, you just put in another quarter, and eventually over time, 2 more quarters, 4 more quarters to keep playing. So this idea of give us a little bit more money and we'll give you a little bit more entertainment has always been around. And we never thought of it as microtransactions. That's how you had to play a game, which is why home consoles flipped that whole industry, the arcade industry, on its head, because it no longer had that same draw. You didn't have to keep putting in quarters anymore. Now you paid a premium price and had full-time, all you can access, all you can play type access. So, but I think the concept was around way before we even had the internet. I think arcade machines began this, and companies were able to make a lot of money on this. Of course, that industry for the most part died out, and outside of retro bar type experiences now, arcade machines are the kind of thing that collectors have, or you might find in some old Pizza Hut, the corner of the restaurant or something.
Yeah.
But the digital version of microtransactions really took off in the 90s. Of course, this is when you have the internet going and you have MMO games on the PC. And so as these games started to ramp up and build these huge communities of people that were playing online, companies like Nexon from South Korea started to recognize our subscriptions are down. What if we dropped the price of the game, maybe all the way to $0, and started charging for in-game things? Those are the kind of companies that really trailblazed this digital microtransaction movement. And then it continued into the 2000s. Games like RuneScape, Neopets, EverQuest, and other MMOs. These were how they were making money. They would give the game away for free and then make it very easy and simple to kind of keep feeding that addiction of small purchases here and there for different things. So these are the games that really got it going. None of these are games that I played. Did you play any games in the 90s or early 2000s that kind of had this free-to-play model? Do you remember if you played any that were like that?
Nah.
Okay. Because I knew a few who played RuneScape. That was fairly popular, especially with young kids who had a computer but maybe couldn't afford to buy their own games. But more specifically in some Asian countries, I think China was mentioned specifically in a couple places that I read. Gamers over there, the economy didn't really make it so people could afford to buy full-price games a lot, especially a lot of gamers from lower-class families. They couldn't buy full-price games. So the game sales typically struggled with that audience, and piracy was just through the roof moving through the 2000s. Games are getting pirated like crazy in places like China. And of course, they had those... you ever been in one of those internet cafes?
Yeah.
Essentially a giant computer lab that people can come in and they would all just sit there and game for hours and hours and hours. And so those kind of places flourished as well. So companies started making their games completely free to play, and their player bases and revenue streams just went through the roof because they just charged for the small little chunks of experiences within their free games. So this is kind of where it all began. It was really in that PC MMO market, and really wasn't in the States where this all took off. In the States, it really took off in 2 main areas. On your mobile phones and on the Xbox 360. And of course on PC as well.
So blame Microsoft.
And blame Microsoft, well, and Apple too. Because small social media games, think Farmville, remember Farmville?
Yeah.
And games like that. Those types of games, and pretty much anything made by companies like Zynga, however you pronounce that. They were making, by 2009, they were making over $50 million a year on microtransactions alone.
Yeah.
So they started to realize very quickly, this works. You get people hooked on this little free experience, and then like in Farmville, for example, you run out of energy or whatever the thing was that you ran out of, but all you got to do is pay $9 and you can get a pack of 500 energy, and then boom, people would keep playing. So this worked. This was working like a charm. And so by 2009, it was a very regular thing that we were seeing. Of course, on Facebook with Facebook games, but also on mobile devices as those took off. But it wasn't until, well, so 3 years before that, in 2006, is where we had the infamous Horse Armor Pack. I even remember this, and I wasn't an Elder Scrolls Oblivion player. But I remember hearing about the Horse Armor Pack. For $2.50 on Xbox Live or for $2 on the PC, you could buy this Horse Armor Pack microtransaction, this small sale. And it was one of their top sellers for a long time in the Xbox Live store. This is where it really took off for consoles, because then other games started picking up steam with this. So games like Cameo and Perfect Dark and Project Gotham Racing 3, these games started to add these little things you could buy on the side, these cosmetic pieces, these Horse Armor Pack equivalents. And the idea is that Microsoft started having things called like the $10 project and things like this, where they wanted players to be able to buy more of that experience for less than a full price of the game. At least this was their marketing team saying this, right? They wanted to make more money, is really what it was. But they said they wanted to free players up from needing to buy $5 to $20 bundles or large DLC packs and allow them just to pick and choose. The idea was, at least the way they marketed it was, we want you to pick what you want for your DLC. We're not going to make you pay a full premium price and then tell you what to have. We're going to let you pick and choose. So that's how they tried to pitch it, and it actually started to really, really work.
Well, I think that goes, and we talked about it when we originally talked about microtransactions, that this goes back to the state we're in now is different than back then. And what I mean by that is, while you're looking at it from a business perspective, and that Microsoft was like, money, money, money. Yeah, I think to a certain extent, yes, they cared about, well, hey, we can sell this game for $60, but then we can also allow you to buy this something extra, and it's optional for $2 or $3, and that means more money. But the point I'm trying to drive at is gamers back then wanted this stuff.
Absolutely.
This is stuff that didn't exist and I was one of them that was like, you mean I can get more of my favorite game, or I can dress my character up, or what was the things that the Xbox 360 started, your avatar. I love dressing up my avatar of my favorite game stuff.
Yep, he could put on a T-shirt of his favorite game. Yeah. Yep. And so there's two things there, and I totally agree with you. Number one is the excitement in the gaming community, although there were many people who were very outspoken about how bad this is and where it's going to go. The majority of people were not only approving of it vocally in online forums and just talking about it, the same excitement you just shared, but they were voting with their wallets. And so the fact that customers kept buying this stuff told companies everything they needed to know. This is working. Customers want this. Let's keep going.
Yep.
And so I think we all spoke with what we spent money on. That's the reality of it. And so, of course, companies like Microsoft, companies like EA and Bethesda, I know everyone loves Bethesda. They were some of the earliest and most frequent offenders in terms of people who look at microtransactions as something bad. They'd have to point the finger at companies like Bethesda, who are, for the most part, pretty well loved in the gaming community. But they were some of the ones who really helped push this forward with their games, with really all of their games.
Yeah.
But, of course, the big, bad EA company comes in, and they were experimenting with this too. Of course, they own a ton of developers, and they were doing stuff in the mobile space and Facebook games. But in 2010, they turned a page with their sports franchises, and they introduced the online pass. And, of course, this bled over into other franchises outside of sports, but sports is where you saw it most prevalent. So when you would buy a copy of Madden 2011, or Madden 11, I guess they called it, you would get a little card inside that box when you bought it, and it would have a code there. That was your online pass code. So if you bought this game brand new, then you had access to the online pass for the most part. But if you bought it used, or if a friend let you borrow it, or if you rented it from GameFly, then you didn't have access to the online pass because that code has been used. There is no code for you to use. You can now go online and buy it. I think it was usually $20 or something like that.
$10.
Was it 10? Okay. So you could pay money to get your access to the online pass. Now, the way EA pitched this idea was to say, we hear your concern, gamers, about microtransactions, and we want to help. So we want to give you this online pass where it's more of a premium price you're paying for a ton of DLC type stuff. The reality is, on the business side, so I think there's some truth there. I'm not saying that EA is totally evil, but the reality is, on the business side, they were very obviously losing out to pre-owned game sales and companies like GameFly who were renting their games out. And they were using this to recoup some of those losses, and it definitely worked in terms of money at first, but it really only lasted for about 3 years, as far as I know, for most of their gaming franchises. They might have continued it for a few of them. But this idea of a paid online pass didn't continue long term. But that didn't stop EA from trying other things. That same year, they began including the Ultimate Team, which is, in my opinion, their version of loot boxes for sports games. The idea being that you buy card packs, you unpack those cards, you form your team, and you can go and use those players or coaches or all the things they added to the Ultimate Team in online an online games or games against against computer, and you of course make your team better. You unlock more cards, you get more in-game currency to buy more packs. Maybe you can go, and they created an auction system where you can now trade and sell your Ultimate Team cards with other gamers online. It's pretty brilliant the way that they did this, and this thing is still rolling, and it makes them, according to some of the sources that I was reading, about $800 million per year, just on Ultimate Team alone. It's an insane revenue stream for them. I think FIFA is probably the most popular one, although Madden's fairly popular as well. Now, I love the Ultimate Team. It's kind of like a fantasy football or fantasy basketball or fantasy soccer element thrown into the game where you kind of build your own team. But it certainly is a microtransaction heavy experience. But to me, it didn't feel that gross for some reason. I don't know why. I thought it was a cool idea.
Because they reward you pretty good. They had a good balance back then. I don't know how it is now, where if you were playing the game, you were getting enough loot that you could go buy packs. You know,
yeah, that's true. I felt like I was opening packs all the time. Yeah. And it was pretty exciting every time you opened one.
Even recently when I was doing FIFA, and I don't do it a lot, but like when we started it, me and Eli, I would play a match and I would have enough to buy like a basic pack. Now, if I wanted an upper pack, I would have to play for a little while. But that makes sense because they were higher level packs. But yeah, I think they have a pretty good system. But they do know, and I'm sure you're going to get to this, that there are certain people that are impatient or they just want the best team right away and they will just spend the money.
Yep, and they do create that opportunity in some cases for those games of EA's where they have the auction. You can a lot of times go and just buy it from another player, you know, using that in-game currency as well. EA wasn't the first to come up with this idea of a loot box, a roll of the dice. Of course, this has been going on for years in other ways. One of the major ways it kicked off in gaming was in 2007. There was a Chinese MMO. I'm blanking out on the name of it. I read about it. But they began this idea of loot boxes where you pay a set amount, you're guaranteed to get something, and then you have a chance of getting something amazing. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of loot boxes really became popularized there. Other game companies took note because of how much money this Chinese developer was making, and companies like EA and Valve, who added supply crates to Team Fortress 2, which is loot boxes, they started to use it as a way to make money. And of course, if you guys are on Steam at all, you know Valve has continued that practice in a number of ways to get people to pay a ton of money in small little increments. Valve has been pretty smart about that. But even Mass Effect 3 and Dead Space 3 and some major AAA console game releases included options for loot boxes and microtransactions over the next few years. So it wasn't limited to certain developers or certain games. Everyone wanted a taste because there was so much money to be made from this kind of business setup. So where are we today? I'll go over real quick some of the things that have happened in the last couple years with microtransactions and loot boxes specifically. Overwatch kind of reinvigorated interest in including microtransactions in AAA full-priced games. It was already happening in the sports world and a few other places, but they hadn't really nailed what it should be. Overwatch, very popular game. People loved it. It won Game of the Year from a lot of different places. And they, of course, have, I think it's aesthetic-only loot boxes. I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's any way to...
You don't get any advantages in the multiplayer at all.
And I think that's why it was so popular and generally not really complained about. Because it's like, hey, if you want to look a little different, if you want your character to be decked out in some new way, whatever, go for it. Like it was like, it didn't really upset people because it was not a pay-to-win situation. Which, by the way, we're not even covering that. Plenty of games, especially the low-quality, unknown games and mobile and some of the online spaces, there's plenty of games where you can pay to win. And that's awful. That's garbage. And that's why people get upset. But when it's for aesthetics, I think Overwatch is a pretty good example of a good way to do it. And they've made a ton of money from that. Other modern day games are using them as a way to keep players interested after their initial run with the game is over. They don't really push it on you too hard. And I'll use Shadow of War as an example for that. I didn't feel like I was pushed towards it so hard that I had no option except to go buy extra stuff. I felt like I could run through that game initially and not really worry about extraneous stuff. Now, when the game was over, that's when, if I decided to keep doing some end game stuff, I could see myself maybe spending a few extra bucks. I don't think I will, but I could see why people might. Yeah. So modern day games are using it as well, and I would suggest that Nintendo may have right now one of the more creative versions of microtransactions with Amiibo, where you're buying these little collectible figures, which essentially are microtransactions that you can use in various games in various ways. It's kind of a stretch, I guess, but in my opinion, Nintendo's doing it in a creative way where they're getting you to buy these collectibles from them. They're, of course, making a ton of money on these things, and then they give you little boosts and bonuses in games as well.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to happen next. You know, the Mario figurine from Mario and Rabbids might do something special in some unknown Mario game in a couple years from now. You never know. So that's where we are today. Can you think of any other examples that I left off of here? We're going to talk about Battlefront in a second. I know Forza 7 uses some microtransactions. You can buy cars, I think, things like that. What else is going on today that includes microtransactions?
Well, I mean, Assassin's Creed Origins has it. You can play the game and not touch it, kind of like Shadow of War, but if you go into their little store area, you can buy resources and weapons and stuff like that. And I will say this, the game is very, for me personally, and again, I'm sure other people will be like, no, there's no issues, and they'll defend the game. I never ran into a situation while I was playing Shadow of War where I was like, man, I just don't have a good enough weapon. I'm running into that with Assassin's Creed Origins, and here's why. I have legendary weapons, but in order to level them up to where I'm at, the cost of upgrading is extremely high, and it's
crazy. Really
pissing me off. Like, I have one weapon, it's a legendary, it's not like a sword, it's kind of like a sword, and it goes into like a hook type thing. And I really want to upgrade that weapon. The main reason why is because all the other legendaries I have are cursed weapons, and so they lower my health. Like, I can't fully regen my health, so I'm like, well, I want to upgrade this one then, because I don't want the cursed ones anymore. $5,200, and I have like $200, and I have nothing really to sell. Like, yes, I loot and do all that stuff, but even when you loot, you get like $100 per weapon. I'm like, This is dumb. Like, this is ridiculous. It's almost like I can say, for me personally, they were trying to push me to go buy something if I want to stay current or relevant. And in this game, since it is a heavy on the RPG, and we talked about it earlier, you could be a really good fighter, but if you go against something that's a level 31, you're a level 28, you're done. So if you have weapons that are
the strong weapons,
if I have a weapon
I don't think it's limited
22,
to gold. I don't think it's limited to gold. I think they're a little stingy when it comes to the resources it takes to upgrade your armor and your hidden blade. And there's a couple things that you can upgrade. The quiver to hold more arrows. All those things can be upgraded using materials. And for the most part, you can find those materials in treasure chests and stuff, and when you loot people randomly. But and not very often. The drop rate for those things is super low, although they do kick in sometimes. The main way you're going to get that stuff is when you disassemble weapons and armor that you don't need.
So then I'm torn because I was disassembling a bunch of stuff, but then I was like, well, I'm leveling up my character, but now I can't buy weapons, or I can't upgrade my weapons. So it's been very grindy feeling because I'm not rushing through the campaign, and I'm a little frustrated with that. So that is a major.
Well, I do think that some of the side missions, even some of the main missions, they do a fairly good job of doling out either the legendary or what are the purple ones?
Rare.
Either the gold or purple weapons. They do a fairly good job at a decent clip, giving you, those nice, strong weapons. The problem is, a lot of times it's going to be a heavy weapon or something that I don't use. I like to use a medium or lightweight weapon. I like to strike really fast. So all that to say, I think they do an okay job of it, but I totally feel your pain. There's times when I'm like, man, the prices to upgrade this stuff is a little extravagant. I didn't even think about the microtransaction piece for Assassin's Creed, to be honest with you. So I guess in my opinion, they're not pushing it. They're not saying, hey, you're a little short on cash. Do you want to buy some more gold or whatever?
They don't flash it in your face every 5 seconds. They actually do it in an intelligent way, and here's how they do it. They have it in a separate store area, okay? They don't overly advertise it. But the smart thing that they do is they get you into the store, and they do that by giving you a free, I think it was 200 Helix. So if you go into the store, you can spend that 200 Helix. And I think what I bought was the resources. I think there's a resource pack for like 200. So I bought the resources. But that's where you see all the weapons, you see all the stuff. So they 100% gave that to me for free, not because they're nice, because they wanted me to look at it and be like, well, now that you're feeling
Ubisoft
the grind.
has been doing that. We didn't even mention Ubisoft. They've been doing this for a while with the Ubisoft place where you go, you create your account, and then every game you play. I do like that they track every Ubisoft game you play. I looked down through my list recently. I was like, wow, I've played a ton of Ubisoft games. I like a lot of their stuff. And then you can, of course, use their special currency to buy in-game items and that kind of thing. So I have used that before. I guess I just like that they don't, in the game, in the experience, remind you, hey, now that you're short on this, just go buy it in this place. Now, is that big of a difference? Maybe not. But for me personally, it does. And we're going to get to this in a minute. It does not break my immersion in the game. So if I'm short on the cash or the resources, I continue playing and see if I can find some side missions to run or some, encampments to loot to try to get that money. So we'll get to more about the immersion piece in a second. I have some thoughts about that. Let's talk real quick about why we think developers use them. Why do developers and publishers lean towards this business model? I'll give you one main reason. It's because it works.
Yeah, of course.
This business model works. If you look back at EverQuest, back in the late 90s and into the 2000s, they saw an increase in their subscription base by 150% the moment they went free to play. When they made their game free to access and went to a microtransaction model, their subscription rate went way up and the revenue went up as well, because with that many more players, all you need is a small percentage of them to start buying the in-game stuff, and you're golden. You make back that premium you lost real fast. 92%, I think this is as of 2 years ago, 92% of revenue in the major app stores, both major app stores, Android and iOS, they're from in-app purchases and microtransactions. 92%. And that's, think about how many games and apps cost money. Even with the premium price, it's those small little purchases within the games, within the apps, that make the most money. Only 8% of revenue from those stores is from a premium purchase. I bought this game for $9.99, or I bought this app for $20. Those only make up 8% of all revenue in those stores. That's crazy to me. As of 2016, mobile gaming revenue, which, by the way, we just heard 92% of that is from microtransactions. Mobile gaming revenue for the first time has surpassed both PC and console markets. Not combined, but the PC market by itself and the console market by itself are now in second and third place behind mobile gaming revenue. And again, most of that is microtransactions. This is all evidence to why they use it. It works. Also, think about impulse buying. Impulse buying is a real thing. When you're at the front register and you see that candy bars are 2 for $1, you might buy one, right? That impulse moment where you're like, that's not too bad. Maybe I'll grab those. There's a reason that grocery stores have certain things at the front register, because it works. Impulse buying is a real thing. So when you're in-game, when you're in-app, 99 cents, or in your case, 50 cents for a sword, whatever, those things don't feel that scary. Like, you won't even notice that when you go to do your budget or to balance the checkbook. You're not going to notice that kind of thing. 99 cents, $1.99 here and there doesn't really seem to be that scary. It's the same thing with iTunes when you go to buy a song. 99 cents for one of your favorite songs that you'll have on repeat doesn't feel that bad. And it's the same thing. This impulse buy kind of psychological approach to selling stuff, it works. It really, really works. And I'll give you one more reason I think that these work, and that's loss aversion. You just talked about getting frustrated in that Coliseum moment, or in that big arena moment, right, in Assassin's Creed. Mm-hmm. That happens to all of us. We hit those moments in games where we go, this is ridiculously tough. I've had those for sure. Think about a game like what was that Quantum Break? Has a notoriously annoying boss fight at the end of it.
Yeah.
If you die 4 times in a row and the game gave you a little notice that said, hey, for 99 cents, I know this sounds dirty, but just go with me. For 99 cents, you can be invincible, or the boss will start with half health, or we'll give you this special weapon. Whatever the little bonus promise would be, even if most of us kind of like scoffed at that and moved past it, all it would take is a small percentage of those people for that company to make a ton of extra money.
Yep.
To give them that little, here, you know what, you're feeling frustrated, let me help you out. This is a thing called loss aversion when you talk to people about human behavior. It's this impulse we have to do what we can to avoid loss. We do it in relationships, we do it at work, we do it all the time, and we do it in gaming as well. What can I do to avoid another loss? That's why people quit towards the end of a game. That's why people want a forfeit option in Rocket League. That's why people unplug their machines in Madden as the game gets out of hand, so they don't have to take the loss aversion is real. And if you can just for a couple of cents or a couple of dollars avoid it, we will do it. So I think these things are kind of interesting ways for us to look at why developers use microtransactions. A few other things, and feel free to interrupt me.
No, go ahead.
The revenue stream, it outpaces traditional premium purchases by a large margin. That's just goes without saying. Companies are making way more money with this type of structure than they are with just a standard, straightforward, buy the game once and you're done. They're making way more money. It also allows free-to-play type games to exist, and I think this is something we should consider as, for the most part, a positive. There are a lot of developers out there and a lot of games out there that would never see the light of day if it weren't for this business model. So that allows for a lot of people out there to get their work to potential customers. Does this mean that we get a ton of garbage? Yes, it does. We get a ton of TGT, absolute waste of time products. Yes, we do. But we also get to hear from some new up-and-coming developers, someone who's got a great idea that then turns into something much bigger and greater. A great example of this is the company that eventually made Castle Crashers. When they had that alien... was it hominid or something? I forget exactly how it was pronounced. Hominoid. Anyway, it was this little alien game that you could play. It was a free game that they didn't have in microtransactions as far as I know. It was a browser-based game. But because they made it free, they got the exposure they needed. They ended up getting the funding they needed to create Castle Crashers down the road. And of course, now they're very successful because of that. So when a developer has a chance to get their game in front of people, it can lead to success and a win-win for both them and the people who like their games. So free-to-play existing isn't necessarily a bad thing. It creates, think about the competition for apps and games. If you ever open up the App Store on your iPhone or your iPad or open up the Android store, can you imagine trying to make money in that place without some extra help from Apple or from Google to really promote your app, the thing that you made? So making it free is really the only way a lot of these developers have a chance to make some money.
Yeah.
And of course, as we all know, games like Candy Crush, they can have millions and millions and millions of people play for free, and they do. But they have a handful of whale consumers that make the developer profitable across the entire spectrum, because they get a few people. All it takes is a few people who get hooked and will spend literally thousands of dollars on their game with their microtransactions just to keep playing. And as crazy as that sounds to me, it works. And lastly, it's a good solution for piracy. So when you make a game and you charge $60 for it, and people figure out a way to kind of hack and get around the price and play it for free, you're losing a ton of money. You're just bleeding money. When you make the game free, and the only way to get all the pieces of it is for them to pay these small little increments in-game, it really makes piracy a lot more challenging. Not impossible. Some hackers have figured out ways to, essentially make it available to people to have access to stuff in game, but it's very tough and it's much more challenging than simply pirating a whole game. So it's been a good solution for companies to combat piracy as well. Is there anything you think I'm missing there? Does it make sense to you, Derek, why developers and publishers lean this way? And is there any other reasoning that maybe I missed as to why they might use microtransactions?
No, I think we hit on it. Like I said, I think it started out as an honest, we the gamers wanted it. I think while they saw, corporations saw the benefits of getting more money out of us, I think they also were like, well, we oblige. We want to give you more. I think it was that mutual agreement. I think what we're going to talk about next, and I'll allow you to intro it, is why it's a little scary and how things have changed now, because it's not that innocent anymore. It's a greedy... Look, gaming has become, the biggest medium in all the things that exist. Music, movies. I think gaming
TV,
makes the most money. I might be off on that, but as far as I heard, it's actually the biggest.
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, you get people... You get a ton of people that get involved, and they only want to get involved for one reason, and that's to capitalize off it. They don't have any passion for gaming. They don't care about it. In fact, one of the news stories, and I'm not going to go way off, but this just makes sense on what we're talking about here. One of the news stories recently come out was a Twitch guy ranting about how he's pissed off because gaming was for us nerds, for us geeks, blah, blah, blah. And while his rant was making sense, he was also coming across as a complete douchebag. And what he was basically complaining about is that there's a bunch of Twitch streamers that are basically half-naked women that don't care about gaming. They're just doing it to make money. He's actually right. I do believe there are some women gamers, but I guarantee you 80 to 90% of them that are doing Twitch streams that are half-naked, they aren't doing it because they're like, I really like video games. They're doing it because they make money off it. Just like I never believed Naomi Kyle was really a gamer. I never believed she was. I believe she was a cute girl from Canada that got hired by IGN, and she's probably played a video game before. And every time she talked about it, she sounded stupid. So the point I'm driving at is this is what happens when things get really, really big. And I've been saying for years, I know there will be a day, because I hear people all the time say, I'll be a gamer for life. There will be a day, I don't know when I go, you know what? I hate you. I hate everything you stand for. Goodbye. I mean, I did it with IGN and GameSpot. I followed those two websites for years, and I finally hit the point where I was like, you know what? I hate you. I literally hate you, and I'm done. So I know that that point will come because of how big it is, and you're getting infested with a lot of disgusting people who work at these corporations and YouTubers and Twitch streamers and all that, and all they care about is money. They don't care about games. They don't care about the consumers. They care about this. And so,
sure. Well, I mean, there's an audience and there's money to be made. So you're gonna find companies. You're gonna find businesses there.
Well, it's just like music industry. I mean,
it's everywhere.
They spin out the same stuff, and I'm not one of those hippie like cool guys like anything that's pop sucks. I like pop music, but those people writing these songs that are on the top of the charts, do you think they were sitting in their house one night all alone with their guitar going, I just want to write a song that it means so much to me? No, they went to some idiot who writes music over and over and like, how can you make me millions of dollars? I'm going to write you the same song I wrote for this guy over here. We'll change it a little bit. We're going to release it. You're good. And that's what they do.
I don't know, man. I like to think that these artists are sitting alone, maybe up on the roof on a starry night, and there are tears in their eyes as they're trying to write a song about
blowjobs and whores.
Please turn it up in this club, you know? And they're just like crying their eyes out as they think about the club.
How do I get her to suck on my lollipop? Oh God, what a great song! I mean, come on, it's everywhere. Anytime they can make money, this is what happens, and that's why I said, for me personally, this is just the beginning of probably at some point you'll hear me say it, and I'll actually do it where I'll be like, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, and at least done with certain companies, certain developers for sure.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen. Yeah, that's gonna happen. We'll talk about that and as we close out with Should We Worry in just a second. Let's talk about why people hate them. Why does it cause so much anger and vitriol, especially, of course, in the online communities where everyone has a voice and gets to share their thoughts very loudly. But why do people hate them? I've got a couple ideas, and maybe you've got some insights as well. I think there's 4 main reasons that jump out to me why people hate them. Number 1, it implies that the main experience that we've given to you is incomplete. And we have purposefully made that experience incomplete, and we want you to pay extra money to get the complete experience. I think that's one reason why people hate them. Number 2, I think they hate them when these games allow their competitors, if it's an online competitive game, it allows them to have an advantage by paying more. Mm-hmm. So I'll lose because someone else has more money or wastes more money or whatever it is. Of course, that would make me hate microtransactions as well, and that happens. Even whether it's direct purchase or through a loot box of some kind, there's a way that people can pay to win, and that's frustrating. That's infuriating at times. Number 3, and this is the biggest one for me, is that I think it can be invasive to the gaming experience. It can really kill the immersion. And I feel this with stuff like Assassin's Creed and Shadow of War, I like to be immersed in those worlds and feel like I'm really there and fighting these orcs for real. And I like when the story's good and the characters are interesting and the combat's fun, because then I just get to kind of escape from reality and really enjoy the game. And when they keep reminding me that for just 99 cents more I can fill in the blank, that can kill the immersion. I know I just talked about how Shadow of War and AC don't do that. I'm not saying that they do. I'm just saying that when that happens in a game, it can kill the immersion. And for my favorite types of games, large-scale, epic action-adventure type games with some RPG elements, like if I'm playing Horizon Zero Dawn and they keep reminding me that just for a few dollars I can now ride my own metal dino around or whatever, that's going to ruin the experience for me if they keep pinging me with that. So that's, for me, it feels invasive to my experience. That's one of the reasons that I sometimes hate microtransactions. And the last piece is it just feels dishonest and gross. It feels like someone who is not a gamer who's sitting in a boardroom somewhere making a decision to make more money. It just feels dishonest from these companies. I think those are 4 main reasons. What other reasons are out there, do you think, that why do people hate microtransactions?
I honestly think you covered them all. I mean, the biggest complaints I see are the intrusion. Like I said in the beginning, I felt like it was gamers encouraging this, wanting this, and now that they're starting to see the greed of corporations, or like we've talked about in the past, certain companies making games and doing this. Like we talked about Battlefront 2 a little bit, and that was legit reasons. And you guys know me. I don't overreact to games implementing ways to get more money. I don't hate microtransactions. Never have. But I do try to assess each situation individually. And when I see games like Battlefront 2, NBA 2K18, and now even Assassin's Creed Origins kind of frustrating me a little bit, because I've played all the Assassin's Creed games, and there was never a time where I was like, I better go buy all this stuff. This one's a bigger game. This one's more like The Witcher 3, but it feels like they want you to play this for 100 hours to get through a 15-hour campaign, which is annoying. But I think the biggest problem is that switch from people wanting this to now we don't trust who's actually producing this content. And I do think some of it's valid. Like I said, I'm more case by case. And I do think some of it's over-dramatized just because they want to go into Unlocked or some other big group and whine because they get attention themselves for doing it. So I do get annoyed with consumers as well, because most of them, I'll be honest with, 90% of them are uneducated. It's the worst trying to talk to these people that play video games and they know what they're talking about. They're so uneducated.
They read a headline somewhere and saw someone else make a comment, and so they decide that they're on that team.
Well, and the thing is games media, and we just talked about this, is dishonest in themselves. Like, I don't like Jason Schreier or whatever his name is. I don't like him at all. I think he's annoying. But I can at least respect that guy, at least from what I've seen, goes beyond the headlines. Like, there were several games media sites that just ran with stories without doing any research. One of them that just recently came out is this EA employee who was receiving death threats. Guess what? He's not even an EA employee. Guess who solved that mystery? Jason Schreier. How did he solve it? By asking questions. Instead of running off to tell this lie, to then get everybody else talking about this lie. Even I read the story and I was like, oh, that's terrible. You know, I didn't make a big deal of it, but I was like, that's bad. We shouldn't be threatening EA employees, blah, blah, blah. I'm not happy with Battlefront 2's decisions, but we shouldn't be threatening them. And then the truth comes out, this guy's been pretending to be an EA employee for years. And how did he solve it? By asking him questions. That's it.
Yeah.
He didn't run with the story. Maybe he did write a story before that, and somebody can correct me. I don't follow him. Like you said, not a big fan of him, but I'm going to give him credit where credit's due. He did a little research, and he put to shame IGN, GameSpot, and all of them for running with this stupid story and not doing what they're actually called to do, and that's journalism, research, find the truth, don't just run with whatever you hear.
Well, and the reality is, the reason it was so believable for many of us who saw what looked to be legit tweets from an EA employee is because that kind of thing does happen.
Oh, yeah, of course.
People overreact, like what you're saying. Sometimes the consumers go crazy about stuff, and it wasn't that far-fetched in this day and age for someone to start giving death threats for something that's going on with their video games. And that's really part of what really makes all this feel so messed up, is that there seems to be a good number of companies and publishers who allow the greedy people in the boardrooms to make decisions at times. And I think Battlefront 2 is a case of that, where EA they've tasted the good stuff, right? They've seen where microtransactions can be incredibly successful, and this time I think they pushed a little too far. I think they expected people to because they probably saw the number of hours people put into Star Wars Battlefront 1, and they said, listen, making this essentially free for people who play for this many hours is not a big deal because people play this many hours. So let's make it, like for Darth Vader, I've heard it can take thousands of hours of game time to unlock him, or you can just pay X number of dollars to get what you need to unlock him. And that's pretty gross when you really break down the hours required. I just think that decision was made by someone who is disconnected from the gaming community. So I think that happens, and I also think you've got people like you just described who just go too far on the other side, where part of me is like, listen, this is a company, this is their product. You don't have to like it, but you also don't have to lose your mind over it. Like it's not something that needs to control your life.
And we talked about this. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was just going to say, all I was going to say was that people allow this stuff to really be the most important thing. And I think that's where it becomes unhealthy and people start to do and say crazy things because it is their life. And that's a problem.
Yeah, and video games are very important to me. I mean, if people haven't figured out, I play a lot. I rarely watch TV shows, anything. Video games are my #1 source of entertainment. I love them. But that being said, I live in the world of reality. They will not control me. I will not, they aren't everything to me. I can find other positive things in this world, and I can even see the positives in gaming now. That being said, I do want to look at two things and kind of point out the differences. You have an EA, and I'm not here to bash on EA. I've said many, many times that I like EA. But I can also see the corruption that EA is, and that is, I don't like the direction EA is going in, that if anybody doesn't know how businesses work, I'm going to sound like I'm stating the obvious, but let me explain a little bit further. Businesses are in the business of making money. Everybody knows that. But if you don't really know how they work, here's how they work. The first year they start to make a profit, they're excited. Woohoo, we're making money. Every year after that, if they do not increase what they made the previous year, that's considered a failure. So, what I mean by that, let's say year 1 I make $1 million profit. Woohoo, I'm happy. Year 2 I make a $500,000 profit. I'm still in the positive. I made $500,000 for my company. Net profit. That is considered a negative. You can lose your job if you're in charge. Year before you made us $1 million. This year you made us $500,000. Goodbye. Okay? So, yes,
let me interject right there real quick.
Yeah.
The reason that that's a loss is because based on income or the profit the year before, companies then will forecast out and they will staff according to that. They'll greenlight projects according to that. So there's a lot riding on them hitting certain new profitability benchmarks, right? And so if they don't hit it, even if you look at it and say, but you still made money, yeah, but they didn't make enough because they put too much towards making X number, and they only got to half of that. So that's why it becomes so important. And at the highest level, all they care about is give me the thumbs up or thumbs down. And if it's not a thumbs up, then a lot of people are in a lot of trouble.
Exactly.
And so it is pretty black and white in those terms.
But yeah,
just of the money.
So even if you're making a profit, the point I was making is you are not doing well if you're not increasing profit year after year after year after year. It's not acceptable to be lower the next year. And if you don't think they don't question it, they go through an entire root cause analysis of why we didn't make as much. And for some businesses, to me, as somebody who loves having common sense, I'll be like, well, you sold the Wii that year. You didn't sell it the next year. It's pretty obvious why you did so well. But the point I'm making is EA is driven by that. They must improve. So when you read out stats like, well, they made $800 million off that, they don't just clap over that and then move on. They go, well, how do we make $900 million or $1 billion? Like, that's where their mindset goes. So when you go to that, then you start nickel and diming people. That's when you start to see the constant microtransactions. The Battlefront 2, the reason why they thought they could get away with this, I'll tell you why. There's 2 reasons. 1, Star Wars. And 2, well, we're giving you all the DLC for free, guys. So they announced that first. They got you real excited about free DLC, and the game's still only $60. That's awesome. I was happy about that. And then they released this bullcrap that's clearly has been created to nickel and dime you. And I'm usually on the Frank Clark bandwagon. Him and I usually see things the same way. We realize the internet over-exaggerates. They are not over-exaggerating this. Frank Clark is underselling what EA was doing. They were 100% nickel and diming people. They were pushing people to unlock things. They wanted you to feel underpowered so you would go spend real money.
The fact that they could drop the in-game cost of some stuff by up to 75% in some cases, and it still was going to take dozens and dozens and dozens of hours to get there, tells you how high they had thought they were going to make players go to get it for free, even though they were charging a premium price. So I think there's legitimate complaints for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I think your example of people overreacting, a great example of that is Shadow of War, which I don't think is egregious in its example of microtransactions. They're there. There's plenty of ways to spend money, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it was egregious. You can still enjoy that game in full, in my opinion, without spending extra money.
And the single-player component matters, because even at the end of the game, where it's that end game that we talked about, neither you or I really played much of it. I think I took over a couple of the castles or whatever, but I didn't go and try to beat them all. The reason why that can feel grindy is because that is how they designed it in its single player. Like, they're saying, hey, keep playing this and then we'll reward you at the end with a cutscene. We're going to give you plenty to do. There's a lot to do here if you want to do it. But you still technically beat the game. Like, I feel like I beat the game. With a Battlefront 2, what's scarier about that is this is multiplayer. So they're implementing this in a pay-to-win type of way. I'm not saying it's completely pay-to-win, but it definitely helps. I mean, I've played enough multiplayer games that if somebody has a better gun than me, they're probably going to beat me. And I'm not terrible at them.
The reviewer from IGN, I think it was from IGN, maybe it was GameStop, one of the reviewers of this game, who did not give it a great score, said that they had a set amount of money that their employer told them they could spend on microtransactions to test some things out. And they ended up spending, I think it was like $100 in these kind of loot box type things. And they had, I forget the percentage, it was just a crazy percentage of duplicates that came in those loot boxes.
Yeah.
So they didn't get any of the extra special amazing rare drops, and instead they would always get at least one new thing that was pretty good or just okay, and then a ton of duplicates that doesn't really net you much credits back to then go and get more loot boxes. So this system, the loot system and this credit system that they've created for Star Wars Battlefront 2 was very poorly designed, thought through, and executed, without a doubt. I think people have a legitimate concern. Hopefully EA tries to right the ship a little bit with that one. But all that being said, since it's not a game that I'm playing, for me personally, I have yet to experience a situation where a franchise that I love has been ruined by microtransactions. I've seen them introduced. They're starting to show up all over the place, but I have yet to worry about it. I have yet to experience that. But I do think, and this is how we'll close, when I ask the question, should we worry, my answer right now, I'm kind of on the fence. I think we do need to worry, but on the other hand, we don't have to worry about all video games. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my answer, is we do need to worry if this thing bothers you. It's not going any. So I would say yes, because it's not going anywhere. There's too much money on the table. Too many of these companies are very aware. The stats have been there for now over 10 years on how much money you can make with this business model. It's not going anywhere. Why would it? You wouldn't make the decision to get rid of it either. Okay, if you're in charge of a business, you wouldn't turn down this money either. But the reason we should worry is that some companies, some developers, even ones that we love, they're going to be super greedy and they're going to ruin your experience with some games. It's going to happen. It has happened already in some cases, and it's going to continue to happen. Who knows what the next big one's going to be? I'm just hoping it's not something that I'm hyped for. I'm just hoping it's not Red Dead Redemption 2 turns out to be a microtransaction disaster. It could be. It could be. 2K likes to make money this way too, so you never know. But I don't think it will be. That being said, I do think we need to be just ready for when that happens. But on the other hand, I would say don't worry too much, because not every developer and every publisher is going to go this way. I think we will always have some developers, maybe even many, who their bottom line is they want a great experience for you, the gamer, the end user. They want you to enjoy it, so you will be a loyal and returning customer of theirs for their products. So I don't think companies are stupid greedy. I just think they are greedy. So I think they want to make money, but I also think they highly value the trust of their consumers, knowing that you can make a lot of money this year, but then next year everyone's gone. They don't want that to happen. You and I talked about this a bit. So I do think there's some worry there, but I don't think you have to panic. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think that anytime soon we're going to see all video games go so grossly towards microtransactions that we can't enjoy games the way we used to anymore. I don't think we'll get there, personally. What about you? Do you think we should worry?
All right, so I think a few weeks ago I said no. My answer has changed with everything that's going on. And it isn't just Battlefront 2. Need for Speed Payback. I bought that game. The whole system, and I want to make sure we mention this because I know some listeners are probably like, look, we're not all worried about microtransactions. We're more mad at the loot boxes that has stuff that's more than just cosmetic. So here's why I bring up EA again. I'm picking on EA. Need for Speed Payback. The entire progression system for a single-player game is built off these loot boxes. So you basically, anytime you upgrade your, like if you complete a mission, you get the ability to pick a card, and it's a random card. It flips over out of 3, and then you get a part. Now that part could be better, worse, or the same. You don't know. It's random. If it's better, you can equip it. If it's the same, you can sell it, or if it's worse, you can sell it. So they give you're at least getting something out of it. But they're definitely making it more random, and they're making it hit or miss. And in some cases, you might end up, because it's so random, being more miss than hit. So I do have an issue with companies like EA and how they're viewing this. And I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. Some of these corporations and these companies are out of touch. It's like Hollywood actors telling us how to live. I'm sorry, guys, you're out of touch. You don't get
Make
it.
Movies. Stop telling me how
Yes,
to live.
you don't
you
get
live
it.
on Beverly Hills
You're
Boulevard.
delusional. Well, these corporations, and EA is the worst right now, are delusional. Like, I've always had their back because I'm like, well, they gotta have somebody up there who's got some common sense. I'm not seeing it right now. And you and I
still think that EA has done some interesting stuff with games. I'm just worried the direction they're going, right?
Well,
the direction they're heading is
I think they're
concerning,
going to counter it. Look, it's like we've said already. They're going to take as much as we'll give them. The fact that, and again, I don't like whiny gamers, but I do appreciate those who fought for Battlefront 2. And I'm sure I've actually heard they were going to make changes in Need for Speed Payback, because they were already getting complaints about that. It's kind of ridiculous that they're not catching on to this faster. And
they'll have to readjust.
Yes, yeah. But they're going to have to go back to the drawing boards and be like, check one, gamers don't like loot boxes unless it's an Ultimate Team, which is kind of a side thing, or if it's a cosmetic thing. That's the only way we can get away with loot boxes. Second thing, they don't like to be overloaded with microtransactions at all, or they don't like to be thrown in their face. games need to be done more like The Witcher 3. There are more games to do this than The Witcher 3.
Well, and Rocket League does loot boxes, right? Essentially.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to drive at is, especially single-player experiences, please release the game, make gamers feel like it's full, don't sell them a season pass. Well, I know they did it up front, but they at least told you the plans of the season pass, and they said, this is the full game of The Witcher 3. The 2 things we're going to launch afterwards are going to be 10 to 20 hours long, and they're going to be completely separate. Why is that important? It makes people feel like they're not buying the end of the game. That's one thing that I've seen people complain about. They're like, I had to buy this DLC to get the true ending. That's not fair. The other thing is if you do a really good job with the actual game and they feel like they get a complete game that's not nickel and diming you, they're more than likely, I'm speaking as a gamer here, going to fund your game and your expansions more. The Witcher 3 always made me feel like I owed them. Yeah. And they didn't do that through guilt. They did that through giving me stuff. Hey, not only am I giving you this amazing game, but here's some free fatalities, here's some free outfits, here's some free everything. They loaded us with over 20 items that were free. Free DLC. And then when the expansions came out, I said, I want to give you more money because I feel like I ripped you off. I paid $50 for that game, and I feel like I owe you another $50.
Well, and a lot of games will do that kind of thing to try to pull people back. When the game's been out for a while and their user base has taken a dip, a lot of times games will start just giving out stuff. Hey, we'll give you access to this. We'll give you a ton of in-game currency. We'll give you. And I think the companies like CD Projekt Red that do that from the start in a consistent way that doesn't... I don't think they left any money on the table necessarily. No. I think they won so much consumer goodwill that Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine and whatever they do in the future, people are chomping at the bit for more stuff from them because they won so much. So there's 2 ways to approach it, and I think a nice nuanced approach between winning over the consumers and taking advantage of where there's money to be made. And you have to have a balance between the two. And I think that's why I'm not super worried about all of gaming. I do feel like companies like EA, and who knows, in the future maybe Ubisoft, which would be sad because I love Ubisoft, these kind of companies could make enough missteps to kind of go the route of Konami, just to say, you know what, we're just going to make what makes us money. We're just going to make pachinko machines. And so who knows? Who knows where they'll go eventually.
That's what I don't want. I want gamers making games, and that's important to me. I don't want corporations. Of course, I get what corporations can do. But like you just said, when you're not dealing with something that's tied to you emotionally and you're just after the money, then you're going to make business decisions that could be negative to gamers, or you could just up and leave altogether, dropping AAA gaming.
I'll say this, though, Derek. If you really believe that in your heart, then what you need to do right now is go begin supporting indie developers by buying indie games.
They don't make anything good. That's the problem with them. I'll support them when they make something good. I was excited about supporting Heavenly Sword, and that was not Heavenly Sword.
Hellblade?
Hellblade. I actually liked Heavenly Sword. I was excited to support them, and then I ended up getting a game that I'm still angry at. It makes me more angry that Jesse White throws it in our face how amazing it is. No. Jesse White, you were wrong.
If you say the word Hellblade, he'll throw you a love reaction on Facebook, no matter what. You could just say Hellblade, and he'll throw you a love reaction.
It's like he has like some device hooked up to his phone that if Hellblade's typed in and put on Facebook at all, it alerts him for him to go, I love
It's like a homing beacon. It's a homing beacon. Whenever Hellblade's mentioned, he's like, what? Hellblade? What?
So we'll end the show by not being controversial, and I'll just say Hellblade is overrated, Jesse White. You have trash taste, and that's it.
All right, so I think we've learned a lot today. I love talking about these kind of topics, and I think Derek has learned he needs to start supporting indie developers. This has been a good chat. I've been really happy.
Did not listen to what I said. I hate indie games.
I've been happy with the outcome. Derek's going to start buying indie games. This is great. This is good news. So thank you, everybody. This is really just an intervention for you to get you to buy indie games. That's all.
That's what this was all about, to get me to hate AAA. So you planted the EA seed, and now you're going to keep moving on. So I eventually am like talking about Golf Story in like 10 episodes. Like, oh,
Yes.
so great.
Hey, you know how many microtransactions are in Golf Story?
Do you know how many transactions you should ever place on Golf Story? 0. You should not be buying that game at all.
That wasn't as good as you thought it would be in your head. That didn't work out as well as you thought.
Well, the words didn't work.
All right. Well, we are done for this week. I know this episode went kind of long, so thank you for those of you who stuck with us. We'll be back next week to talk about, who knows, Thanksgiving stuff we got Black Friday. I don't know. We'll figure it out for episode 99 before we dive into episode 100. So thanks for sticking with us. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Who is your daddy? I am the father.
You fathers will understand.
My father taught me many things here.
I got an idea. How about you all sit there quietly while I make dad noises?